Hello. Well, you're looking at a clown, aren't you? A smiling clown, a happy clown. And I thought this picture was really appropriate because what we're going to think about is whether we should, as Jews, stop and talk to missionaries, those smiling people that want to convert us to believe in Jesus. Or it could be a Jewish person with a Jews for Jesus t-shirt smiling at us, wanting to convert us. And the question is, should you stop and engage? I would advise no. I was a Jewish believer in Jesus for 42 years. I would say no. And I think the simple reason is this, is that what Christianity does in Jews for Jesus is it totally perverts the Hebrew scriptures. In other words, they have a different interpretation of our scriptures. And in order to engage with them, you have to know your Torah. You have to know the Tanakh, all the prophets. You have to know all of the Old Testament inside out and back to front. And I suspect most of you listening don't, because I certainly don't. I've forgotten a lot of it. Not only that, you need to have a comprehensive knowledge of the New Testament and also know that inside out and back to front, because what you're dealing is with is a different theology, a different interpretation. It's a different religion with different ideas, and unless you know your religion inside out and back to front, and really we're talking about the Hebrew scriptures, we're talking about the Hebrew scriptures, then I would say don't engage, because you will find yourself muddled up and confused and feeling a bit stupid. The fact is, these people learn off by heart Hebrew scriptures and their interpretations of the Hebrew scriptures, right? Which will be totally different to the rabbis. I think what I'm asking you today is to, as a Jew, is to have complete confidence in all the hundreds of thousands of rabbis that have ever existed and who've studied Torah and the prophets and who have enough learning and smartness as scholars and lovers of Torah and all the Hebrew scriptures to know whether Jesus meets the requirements for being the Messiah or whether he doesn't. You don't actually have to be an expert at the end of the day to realise that Jesus is not the Messiah, right? It's not actually rocket science. Jews for Jesus, they won't tell you, and neither will Christians tell you at first, is that the belief in Jesus does require you to worship him. So Christians and Jews for Jesus do actually worship this Jesus figure, right? As we know, the whole point of the Messiah coming is to bring peace. And as Jesus himself readily admits, he didn't come to bring peace, he came to bring a sword. As you probably might know, you might or not know, human sacrifice is forbidden in Judaism. And so the blood of a man who thinks he's God or thinks he's a son of God is not acceptable to the God of Israel. You can have complete confidence in your religious leaders that they know their scriptures and they know with very good reason that Jesus cannot, but in any way, shape or form, be considered to be the Messiah. Now, if you want to understand more about this subject, there's a fantastic website called JEWS for Judaism, and there you will get lots of interesting videos by rabbis who are very knowledgeable in Judaism but also in Christianity, and they can explain to you in detail but in a way that's easy to understand why Jesus cannot be the Messiah. And this is the place I would recommend you to go to, because it was going to that website that convinced me that I was wrong in actually believing in Jesus. And remember, I believed in him for 42 years. And it was going to that website and looking and listening to the rabbis that made me realise I had made a huge mistake. I wouldn't myself stop and engage with any Jew for Jesus or any missionary, because unless you want to get a migraine, right, and you know, it is so complicated with all the scriptures, backwards and forwards. They will be going all round the Bible, right, from Isaiah, going through to Jeremiah, to Daniel, to different books in the New Testament. They will be quoting this prophet, they'll be quoting this, they'll be quoting that. And even I now wouldn't bother to do it, because I'm not well and I haven't got the mental strength to be engaging in that kind of activity. So I wouldn't even do it. I wouldn't do it myself. And quite honestly, you have to really be on the ball and know your stuff and be able to come back very fast with answers. And it's very easy to be trapped and deceived by what they're saying, because much of what they're saying might sound true or it might sound credible, but unless you've actually gone into it in detail, then you won't understand this. And I want you to have confidence in your religious leaders. Jews for Jesus don't have any confidence in the rabbis. They believe that the rabbis are deliberately hiding Jesus. They don't want you to know that he's the Messiah. They also believe, from their own New Testament, that the Jewish people, all the Jewish people, are spiritually blind anyway and can't understand our scriptures anyway. They believe that all rabbis are spiritually blind and they are in rebellion against God and they can't understand the Hebrew scriptures, and they're deceiving you and they're lying to you, and it's really, there's very much anti-Semitic overtones, even though they probably don't mean to have these overtones. It is really at root quite anti-Semitic, because what Jews for Jesus and missionaries are saying is that the rabbis over the centuries, how many rabbis have existed, how many learned men and women now who have studied the Hebrew scriptures, and they are all in agreement Jesus cannot and is not the Messiah. And I would advise you to do what Jewish people have done for centuries in order to preserve their Jewish souls and to be not led astray into idolatry, which is what Christianity and Messianic Judaism is. It is idolatry because they are worshipping this God Jesus. They believe he's God and the Son of God at the same time. What I would advise you to do is not stop. Not stop. Not to stop. I do remember a rabbi who was, when he was in yeshiva, was going to stop and talk to these missionaries, and a fellow Jew stopped him and he said, don't engage with them. And so this yeshiva student was quite offended and like, I'm at yeshiva, I can argue with these people, I can prove them wrong. And he said, no. He says, yes, you're at yeshiva. He says, but you don't know enough. They will confuse you, they will confound you, they will deceive you, they will lead you astray. He says, what you need to do is, if you want to combat evangelical Christianity and come against it and challenge them, what you have to do is to get yourself fully educated and to understand from your own religion why we don't believe in Jesus. Get yourself educated first. Now, there's nothing incumbent upon you or any Jew to actually have to engage with a missionary And I wouldn't advise it. I wouldn't advise it. If a non-Jewish person wants to know why you don't believe in Jesus, tell them it is against the Jewish religion, and if you want to know anything of why this is so, go to Jews for Jesus. I would recommend that you send them to this website. It's far more sensible to send them to a source where they can listen to knowledgeable, learned rabbis who can explain to the non-Jewish world in detail why the Jewish people don't believe in Jesus. It's not your place actually to go and start explaining the ins and outs of everything. You know, I can tell you for a fact, 50 years ago, you could say to a non-Jew, a Jewish person could say to a non-Jew, a Christian, I don't believe in Jesus because it's not our religion, and a non-Jewish Christian, a Christian would accept it and say, oh, right, okay, fair enough, you don't believe it, fair enough, it's not your religion. But the reality is, evangelical Christians and Jews for Jesus will challenge you, and they'll challenge you with all sorts of scriptures that you won't have heard of, and all sorts of questions, and it will leave you baffled, confused, and not knowing how to answer it. And because they are very confident, and because they're quoting so much from the Hebrew Bible, you will tend to assume, or might assume, that they know better than you know, that they know better than the rabbis. But I have to tell you, you belong to an extraordinary people who love and cherish the Hebrew scriptures and have a proper understanding of it. And the rabbis, thousands and thousands of rabbis over centuries, have looked at all these scriptures that the Christians and Jews for Jesus talk about, and they know that these scriptures do not refer to Jesus. They don't refer to Jesus. And trying to engage and combat and debate with these Jews for Jesus and Christians is not for the faint-hearted. I wouldn't do it, and I was a Jewish believer in Jesus for 42 years, and not only that, I studied theology, but I wouldn't do it now because my health is poor, and one of the ways it's affected my health is that my memory is poor. I can't remember all the things that I used to know off by heart, so I wouldn't dream of engaging with these people. I would just say I am not interested and look the other way. So I hope that you will consider and seriously reflect on the advice that I have given you, and don't get into a discussion about Jesus with a missionary, with Jews for Jesus, or any evangelical Christian. Direct them to the website Jews for Jesus, Jews for Judaism, Jews for Judaism, and they can answer their questions. And Rabbi Skobach might even give them a smile too.